On today's event, we have two speakers who are experts in their field. Alejandro and Miret, can you please join me on stage? Hi.
Hi, everyone.
Alejandro Arauz is an interdisciplinary print-based artist exploring issues of identity, diaspora, and transplantation. Alejandro is particularly interested in the Latin American diaspora within Canada and the US. He is the undergraduate chair of the Bachelor in Fine Arts program at Queen's University in Ontario and their print media instructor. Miret Rodríguez is a Blackboard member, art historian, and co-founder of Curated Tastes, an art mediation company. She holds an MBA in Art and Culture Management from the Superior School of Commerce in Paris. During her 5-year stay in Paris, she managed 2 urban galleries and the Culture and Wellbeing Club of Microsoft Europe, Middle East, and Africa. The format today will be very simple. Each will give a presentation, and then at the end, we will open up the floor to questions from the audience. So as you listen to this event, if you have a great question that you would want us to share, please use the Q&A button to add it there, or you can also share it in the chat. If you are watching from Facebook, because we are live on Facebook, your questions there will be relayed to the speakers as well. Thank you both for being here, and now I'll pass it on to Miret.
Hi, Lily. Hi, everyone. Welcome. Thank you so much for that introduction. My presentation is really going to be very brief, more like an introduction. I would mainly like to share a thought with you and an overview of the past conversations we've had here at Black, and how I believe Alejandro's talk will continue these conversations. As some of you might be aware, our former series of live interviews entitled Trascendiendo Fronteras, Exploring Migration Through Visual Art, and our current series, Open Doors to Art, have been a small and initial step into exploring the rich and varied contributions of Latin American artists in Canada, to Canada, and to the fabric of Latin American studies and identity. Many of us here have been impacted by the border and travel restrictions put in place to control this pandemic. The closing of borders and travel restrictions have, of course, contributed to keeping us and our loved ones safe, but at the same time, this added yet another layer to the distance and estrangement that migration brings upon the human experience. Now, I am by no means an expert of migratory studies, nor is this talk trying to address that, but rather this talk, together with the recent ones that we had here at Black, touch upon the ripples, as Alejandro has helped me understand, of immigration and migration, and how visual artists perceive these ripples, assimilate the changes that are entailed by migration, which unfortunately at times entail racism and discrimination towards and amongst ethnicities and nationalities, and how visual artists explore the complex experience of national identity hybridity through their work. As a non-artist and a mere observer, learning about the way visual artists deal with these complexities helps me understand my own migratory experience. I am able to understand that I am not alone, that the feeling of not belonging, of longing for my country, of loss, but also endearment of a new country, is an experience many of us share, and this is one of the reasons why I do what I do. As an art mediator, I want to share with you the wonderful conversations and learnings I get to have with artists such as Alejandro. And as an art historian, I inevitably would like to give you a very brief understanding and context of Latin American art. The concept of a collective Latino identity is something that began emerging in the mid-20th century in the US, amidst the civil rights movement of the 1960s. Latin American artists during this time offered a different perspective to their communities outside their countries of origin and explored their experiences and the phenomenon of biculturality. Later on, and most recently, due to a great part of socio-political agitations, a rising Latin upper middle class, and programs set in place to invite and welcome Latin immigrants, tourists, and workers into Canada, we have been experiencing a rise of the Latin American population in Canada. Latin American art is difficult to categorize. It is hybrid, it's pluralistic, it's alive, and it's constantly evolving. It is a product of multicultural conditions and a multifaceted and multi-layered history. I'm certain that looking into Alejandro's work today will further your understanding of Latin American identity and offer you a different perspective of perceiving. Alejandro, thank you so much for accepting our invitation to talk about your work today. Your work explores many complexities of identity, adaptation, and assimilation, stemming from the Latin American diaspora. You explore this through traditional and interdisciplinary approaches. I will now exit the room and hand over the floor to you by reading an excerpt from your artist statement where you say the following. So Alejandro, in his statement, he says, by exploring the duality between migration and the study processes available to me, I question inclusivity, sentimentality, and heterogeneity. Interdisciplinary methods, like mediated methods and print performance, emerge from necessity to embody both the process and content and to develop new modes of thinking and meaning-making. In this matter, I often contrast migratory vocabulary and studio terminology to expand their physical and conceptual boundaries. For example, layers, matrix, transfer, substrate, impact, pressure, and lineage. My intent is to present shared and lived experiences as a starting point for viewers to examine the relationships that their transformations and cultural practices relate to mine. Thank you so much, Alejandro. The floor is all yours.
Thank you so much, Miret. That was a wonderful intro. I'm just going to navigate here just on a few things before I start, making sure that everything is working. Hello, my name is Alejandro Arauz. I will be presenting works from my practice that I believe relate to identity, belonging, and assimilation. First off, I would like to thank Miret, VLAC, and VPL for inviting me to contribute. I would like to acknowledge that I am currently in Kingston, Ontario, which is situated on the lands of the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe people. Also, that my practice is just one perspective among many, and it is my intent to contribute to the larger conversations being had about Latin American diaspora in Canada. My perspective is this. I was born in Nicaragua and I was raised in Canada, and I lived in the US for approximately 6 years to finally return to Canada in 2011. In this presentation, I would like to focus on a handful of works and go over the influences that shape them. But just before I do, like in my practice, I usually begin with a set of questions. For example, what does it mean to think through expanded studio methods to examine bicultural identity in Canada? And can I thematize the studio methods available to me to draw parallels between the process and diaspora? I guess that through my studio works, I have been trying to answer these questions. The first work I would like to present is a series of lithographic portrait prints entitled Creatures del Monte. I began by working from printed photographs of family members to create a collage and added manually drawn elements before transferring the image onto the lithographic stone. Once the image was transferred onto the stone, I continued working on the image until it was finalized. Printmaking and lithography in general essentially traps the image on the matrix, which is then inked up, and through the application of pressure, multiple impressions can be pulled. The idea of working on a displaced stone, trapping the image on the matrix and applying pressure to create impressions really spoke to the way I was experiencing diaspora. The portrait of my father is called Sembra. I reference his hands and the injuries that he sustained from working in a factory after moving to Canada. I was also influenced by my first trip back to Nicaragua after 17 years away, and standing in the middle of a coffee plantation field that my father planted a few years before I was born. The coffee beans were vibrant red dots in a field of green. It was as if I was another seed. The portrait of my mother is called Balancing. She is the person that kept the balance between the Latino and the Anglo in our family. And for a long time, she refused to become a Canadian citizen. The following images are of my brother, sister, and I. These portraits speak to the landscapes and landmarks that I associate from my close relationship with them and our shared outlook of making the most from our parents' migration. Formally and conceptually speaking, I was also inspired by photography's inherent truth, Cubist compositions, and Mexican retablos. Though I was content with these works, I felt as though I reached an autobiographical dead end, and that my imagery and ideas needed to look outward to contextualize our situation. Also to expand and bridge the processes available to me to better reflect the migrant experience. And lastly, that I needed to own more the figurative and visual elements I was using. In Transfer and Takeoff 2, I transplanted the portrait prints I completed of my family members onto my body as a metaphor for diaspora. In doing so, it afforded me the opportunity to extend the lineage of my imagery and embody the print process even more. Ultimately, I called the process print performance, wherein my body simultaneously became the press, the matrix, and substrate. Terminologies like impact, proofs, states, pressure, relief, etch, and transfers were reimagined to better line up the print process to how I was experiencing diaspora. What resulted was dynamic for me, as I was not only showing traces of previously completed works, but also created a bank of images of some sort from which to extract from to continue exploring lineage, memory, and sentimentality. In the Extraction series, I took 90 still images from the Transfer and Takeoff 2 video performance, wherein I randomly select pictures from the 90 still images to create new compositions. The next work I would like to present is entitled River Duality, El Rio Grande and the Grand River. In 2009, I accepted a teaching job at the University of New Mexico. This opportunity allowed me to do research at a Latin American Studies program and conduct interviews with people in these regions to explore the relationship that these regions had to my experiences in Canada. And since I was transplanting photographic images to other media, I asked myself, why can't I transplant myself to other places and geographies to do research or create more authentic references? During my time in New Mexico, I realized the Latinos in Canada have been feeling the ripples that stem from not only the border regions, but other epicenters within the U.S. In the U.S., bicultural identities have emerged, like the Chicano and the Nuyorican, to name a few. And it is only a matter of time until similar Latino-Canadian bicultural identities emerge in Canada. I interviewed people from various groups like illegal aliens, first generation, and multi-generational descendants that were living in the border areas. I realized that Canada is the 51st option for Latin Americans. As a result, it led me to want to experience firsthand the geographies of these so-called crossing points. Part of the reason for wanting to transplant myself into these geographies was because my experience of entering Canada was for the most part pleasant, but certainly not for my parents. But for the most part, Latinos in Canada do not have the same intense scrutiny labels, and traumas the Latinos living in these border regions experience, though the cultural transformations and negotiations are similar. El Rio Grande is a mythical place for me. I remember testimonials from members of our congregation saying they had to cross this river to enter the U.S. I previously completed other works that showed the same topic. For example, a mixed media painting and a print, both entitled If We Were to Cross, where I used a family photograph of my mother and my siblings in a public pool. In the picture, we looked like we were clinging to our mother so to not drown. And this image always forced me to imagine what it would look like if we had to cross El Rio Grande. In the area I grew up in, Ontario, there is a river called the Grand River, which has a similar ring to El Rio Grande. Though these two rivers are in separate locations, around them Latino and Anglo bicultural identities emerged. For me, the Grand River was a place where I went swimming, fishing, and almost drowned. But I had no actual experience of El Rio Grande. Through the river duality artwork, I wanted the viewer to bring their associations, if they had any, of El Rio Grande and the Grand River, or just rivers in general. I crossed each river for about an hour. I wanted to juxtapose the geographies to obscure actions. I cross each river at opposite times of the day, El Rio Grande at night and the Grand River in the morning. The Rio Grande video was shot in Texas, and on the left is Mexico and on the right the US. In this video, I present a higher point of view to evoke a sense of surveillance, and I cross more frequently as the sun sets. The Grand River video was shot in Ontario, and it has a recreational point of view, and I move across less frequently. I used plastic bags that migrants told me to use as flotational devices, but to also keep my belongings dry as I crossed. I could not help but acknowledge the fact that Latinos in these border areas voluntarily repeat these types of journeys to keep close to loved ones. It reminds me of a quote from an interview with Jose Gutierrez, who was an illegal alien living in New Mexico. He said, "La mayoría cruza para solo regresar, forzado o voluntariamente." The translation is, most cross just to return, forcibly or voluntarily. Another similar work I would like to present is entitled Border Exercise. This performance and video was shot on the Arizona and Mexico border. While living in New Mexico, I interviewed people that worked in the farm fields in these regions, and I was reminded of when I worked in the southwestern Ontario farm fields during my teens and early 20s. I worked alongside people from our congregation that were waiting for papers, and migrant contract workers from the Caribbean and Latin America that were brought in during the summer months. I was amazed to learn about the extent of the migrant situation just outside places I grew up in and in places I was receiving my education. In Canada, like in the US, people waiting for paperwork or asylum find cash paying work. Another influence is that between Canada and the US, similar crossing points have emerged. For example, the Roxham Road crossing point between upstate New York and Quebec. Migrants and their families looking to illegally cross into Canada would travel to nearby towns and hire taxis to take them to this road. And because it is a short and safe walk, and because it is unguarded, it became a popular crossing point. The area between Toronto and Montreal has become the epicenter for Latin Americans in Canada, and these epicenters are similar to the Latino communities within the US. For this work, I used the information gathered from interviews. I present an unmonitored and wall-less landscape. On the left is the US and on the right is Mexico. As I see it, it is a human right to exercise the right to migrate. But the reality is that the most treacherous sections of the border are purposely left open to deter people from crossing. In this location, I perform a workout routine, and I wanted to introduce another set of notions to this site, even if it was just for a short while. But the matter of fact is this: my transplanted experiences do not compare to the fears, aspirations, and conflicts that people who migrated carry with them before, after, and during their journeys. The one shared common aspect is the contradictory feelings of preservation mixed with a willingness to adapt that was awakened in us, which led me to explore notions of authorship, sentimentality, and preservation in future works. In the work entitled Skin Anthem, I explore revealing through my brown skin translations of the English-Canadian anthem. And just like how I was transplanting family photographs to other media, and transplanting my body to other geographies, and transplanting that footage back to print media, I wanted to think through translation and text. I noticed similarities between the bilingual situation in Canada and the bilingual situation in the US, as it pertained to the anthem. Historically speaking, print media was the vehicle used to disseminate the anthem to the public, and thus making it the appropriate process to thematize. I saw certain national symbols as concrete, in other words, not available to reimagine. When the Canadian anthem was changed to be more inclusive, I saw the collective effort to change the anthem like the forces that drive people to migrate in the pursuit of positive change. Another contributing factor was a story from London, Ontario, when the police department there added translations of the word police to their cruisers. I was interested in the implications of change regarding symbols that are perceived as concrete without insight or input. Lastly, I was also influenced after viewing the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms in Spanish. The Canadian Heritage Department took up the task of translating this document to other languages. Though it was a notable gesture, by not acknowledging the names of the translators or not asking for community input, for me, it raised questions regarding authorship and authenticity of the translations. Skin Anthem is a response to these observations, and it consists of 6 parts. 5 of them show the body-pressed translations offset onto paper, and the relief blocks used to emboss the skin. It also consists of a video component that shows the inking of the embossed skin. This work continued my exploration of print performance, but for the first time using text imagery. Ultimately, after completing Skin Anthem, I asked myself more questions. How can I present the process of authoring a translation while also implying the author's physical presence, their thought process, and traces of their identity? This led me to highlight chirography as a performative act. For some reason, I was attracted to the first 4 letters of the word, C-H-I-R-O, which I rearranged to C-H-O-I-R, choir. This led me to think of printmaking's role in a choir and the history of printed music. For this collaborative performance, entitled Choir Chant, I worked with Dr. Adam Adler and the Near North Voices choir he conducts. 8 choir members who spoke other languages volunteered to translate the anthem onto paper, knowing that it would be ultimately sung. They had specific instructions to negotiate interpreting certain words and phrases like God, home and native land, true patriot love, and on guard for thee. The handwritten translations were etched onto acrylic plates from which the public could create rubbings on paper to take away. Once the translations were completed, I worked with Dr. Adler to develop a score that consisted of moments of repose and dissonance. As a result, I guess another question emerged. Can collaborative art projects that offer the opportunity to participate, reimagine, and contribute expand the one-directional tendencies of assimilation? Now, let's have a quick look at the choir chant performance.
Our home and native land.
Onze huis und Heimatland.
Nuestro hogar y tierra de los antepasados. Our home and native land. Nuestro hogar y tierra de los antepasados. Our home and native land. Nuestro hogar y tierra de los antepasados. Hogar de quién? Hogar tuyo. Mío. Los antepasados.
The last work I want to show is currently in progress. It's called Anthem Translation Project, and it's going to launch on June the 1st, where I have created an online platform where I am asking audiences from anywhere and everywhere, and even yourself, to author the anthem, the either English, French, bilingual, and I also have the anthems of First Nations that have authored anthems as well, like the Cree, Mi'kmaq, and Ojibwe, for you to translate and record your authoring of the anthem and upload it onto the website. And the idea here is to flex the sort of one-way assimilation pressure that is put upon people that arrive into Canada. I've always thought that my father would have really appreciated seeing the Canadian anthem in Spanish, just to help understand more the new place he was in. But as well, on the flip side, I ask audiences to translate the anthems from countries that they were born in or countries that they lived in into English or French. So the whole idea is that knowledge sharing and how can online platforms help to awaken more the bicultural synthesis, the fusion, whatever you want to call it, of individuals that are living in Canada to be more inclusive. But that is my presentation, and I hope you enjoyed it.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. That was so wonderful. I'm very touched by your work. It definitely it gets to me, as we say in Spanish. Me llega, me pega muchísimo. And I hope that it was the case for the many of you here today. You did a fantastic job summarizing the amount of work that you have done and the complexities that you addressed in it. So thank you so much for that. And this is great because we have time now to answer a few of the public questions. So if anyone has a comment to Alejandro or a question, let's take advantage of that. We have him here. So I will look now at some questions. So I believe the most important one here, the one that I saw, is if this was being recorded. So yes, Jen did a great job answering that. This is live on Facebook, so you can share with your friends afterwards. I definitely was taking notes as well on your work, and I think I will rewatch as well, but that was so wonderful. So let's see. Do you see any questions in there, Jen, for me? Let's see. Well, so we have compliments here and a comment about the river. But just to understand the two rivers that you talked about, it was one in Canada, the Grand River, and then the Rio Grande in bordering Mexico and the US. Is that right?
In Texas.
In Texas.
More specifically, yes. And a little bit of New Mexico.
Yes, I found that performance very impactful. So one of our attendees was very impressed by the work with the anthems. Usually anthems are very militaristic and even violent. I wonder if that came up on the translations. Did you notice any of that violence?
A little bit in terms of the Canadian one and the French one, not so much, because there is the only, I guess, military word in there is patriot. There could be others, or on guard as well. But I have found, I have accepted about 5 or 6 other translations from other nations into English or French. And yes, there are a lot of military undertones. And another thing I forgot to also mention, for anybody who is inclined to author a translation, you can also upload it to my website anonymously. So I understand the political sort of pressures and underlines of transplanting such prominent national symbols, that all that I truly, how I see this project ultimately ending up at the end is a big coffee book that just has all of the translations of the Canadian anthems, but also translations of other anthems into English and French, to awaken in Canada more the idea of inclusivity and visualizing it and knowledge sharing. But yes, there are very strong military undertones.
Thank you, Alejandro. Can we talk a little bit more, and this is related to someone's question, about your experience interviewing many immigrants at the border between Mexico and the US? You made a mention the term of illegal alien, right? So this is a term that we hear a lot as a common sort of terminology in the US. So that's probably one of the many tensions that we feel in the US. And so here it says, could you please talk more about your use of it in your work and in this presentation of the terminology illegal alien?
Absolutely. So in my youth, in my teenage years in Canada, the only sort of links to what was happening in Latin America or near the border was through TV and movies. So I would always watch movies from Cantinflas or La India Maria. And there were certain episodes there where they just make a stereotype out of a character. So the one sort of clip two clips that come to mind into why I moved there and I activated myself to learn the history and the context of the border regions is because I saw a clip of Cantinflas, and I think it's called Por Mis Pistolas, I think is the movie, where he is crossing the Arizona border, but it is like a small door, but around the door is just open. And the comical aspects, the exchange between him and the officer was just brilliant. And so these are the small pieces of like this extended narrative that I was receiving here in the North in Canada, that just fueled my interest to pursue graduate school in Louisiana, and then after that stay in the US and learn more, because I just began to see these connections, and it's like a ripple. I think that answers the question. If there's something I have overlooked, but
no, this is great. Thank you, Alejandro. And it also, when you mentioned these two characters, Cantinflas and La India Maria, it makes me think about one of the conversations we've had before, and what I spoke about during my introduction to you is the fact that unfortunately amongst nationalities and ethnicities, there's some sort of like internal racism. And these characters of Cantinflas and La India Maria are reinforcing that within Mexico. So I guess I would appreciate if you could touch upon those experiences that you had when you were interviewing people in the border, because you observed that as well.
yes, in my time talking to academics from a few programs and people working at the institutions that I was involved with, I became really aware about the lines that are drawn between Latino, Mexican, Hispanic, Chicano. I mean, they are quite literally evident. And so I was really shocked as to the seeing the sort of animosities within our own groups of let's say, a mojado, or a person who had been in the area for 2 or 3 generations already. So yes, it was both really revealing, a bit sad, but at the same time, there were other people that were just helping each other. So I think it is a case of, that it happens within many cultures that there are a few people that are just hold anger or some animosity because of whatever reason, but there's others that go and help their brethren as well. So, but I was quite shocked to feel and hear the clear lines between what a Latino was, what a Hispanic was, what a Chicano was, and so on.
Of course, thank you so much for that. We actually had a lovely event yesterday. We were speaking about labels and identity, and so I find that to be a very fascinating and theme to keep on talking about. So we do have someone here who is wondering if working on this series, being a part of this event and the series, and seeing the work of your peers. Okay, so perhaps I'm not sure if Alejandro has seen all of the talks that we've done at Black, but I'm sure that Alejandro is aware of other Latin American artists. And so this person's asking if seeing the work of others, of other Latin American artists outside of maybe Latin America, if that has influenced you or changed your perceptions around the topics that you explore.
Absolutely. In Toronto, there is the Latin American Canadian Artist Project, LACAP, and Sur Gallery as well, that I have been involved with. And there's been works by certain artists that have really just hit home in terms of the performative video handling of it. There is Julieta, I think Maria is her last name. I'm so sorry if I get it wrong, but she has this work where it's holding a fish, or another work where she is on her side and there is dirt falling into them. I mean, just poetic works that are from Latin American artists dealing with some sort of hybridity here in Canada. There's also the work of Francisco. He's an instructor at OCAD as well, that his performative works have also influenced. There's one in particular where he draws on the wall his profile that really activated even more that idea of the ripples that we feel as well. In me, at least, that was my interpretations in viewing his work. But yes, there are artists that I have seen more and more that are emerging in Canada. There's also SOTS as well, which is a collective in Toronto. But yes, it has influenced me quite a bit.
Thank you, Alejandro. Yes, I definitely will. We should probably share these links with our audience in a bit. And so you mentioned the word ripples, and not ripples in just the noun, but the ripples of the Latin diaspora, right? And how in the 60s in the US, this was, this kind of expressions were present. And in one of our talks, you also mentioned that how perhaps there's a lot that we could learn in Canada in terms of visual expression from what we already see in the US. So I was just hoping if you could expand a little bit upon that for those who were not acquainted with that talk that we had.
Yeah, so I went to undergrad for art school, grad school for art school as well. And I was just really sort of encouraged to do the cliche exotic Latin work, right? And I was noticing that my peers that were using and handling other processes beyond your typical sort of paint, drawing, and sculpture medias in new ways. So so there is an interesting aspect to sort of consider and see the liberties and autonomies that BIPOC people, artists, are employing in their practice as well. The one thing I wanted to mention as well too is that in my work, the one sort of really influential aspect has been the internet and the extension of my eyes and my hands on the online platform, where I am able to just surf for hours and hours Nicaraguan heritage, even though it is in this other place far away. Through the internet, either through Google Earth, I go and I see my old house or the old neighborhood, or I go and see where my father went to school, or a certain road, or points in history like in Nicaragua. So the internet has really sort of been a rich source, but also a source that I want to avoid using, taking from, without authentic connections to it.
Thank you, Alejandro. We have a comment followed by a question. So very appreciative of your work, especially the multiculturalist aspect and the diversity of styles, probably also media. And the question is, how do you describe your art expression mission to communicate to the public? So so maybe this question is trying to ask how you see your role as an artist for the public.
I don't like the term artist, I'll be honest with you. Like, I find that is quite limited to, like, as soon as you think of artists, you think of painting, drawing, which are fine mediums, but I see myself as a engineer of thought, or a facilitator of expression. So I guess a lot of it starts from the autobiographical point of view that I have really been OCD about how my family is evolving. So, for example, my mother has been a really good sort of gatekeeper as to how much English or Spanish we lose, right? And she has been a sort of foreteller of how about who you're going to marry, the intercultural, multicultural intersex. Like, for example, my wife is Polish. So at home, we really have this 3 language, and now with the oldest going to school in French, 4, right? And so artists, I find, is too one-dimensional, right? Like I think that an engineer of thought or a facilitator is how I see myself as an artist. As an artist.
Thank you, Alejandro. I guess we inevitably will go back to that label, but I definitely agree with you in the fact that there's many artists out there that what they help us do, or is rather navigate our own experience and understand our own surroundings. And I think that's definitely something that I've been experiencing with your work and with the other artists that we've had during our Trascendiendo Fronteras series. So thank you for that. Okay, so how has art impacted the way you or other artists experience the tension between preservation and assimilation? So I'm guessing very close to what you just shared with us. But I don't know if there's anything else you would like to that kind of tension between keeping your identity and maybe assimilating another one.
Yeah, I guess the one sort of aspect I wanted to say is that I chose print because it has a wide range of applications that you can transfer onto, but also the matrix to me became a metaphor for migration. And by transplanting the image and forcing it to find some sort of footing, it became a parallel to my experience, right? So then as it hopped from print to performance, to extracted pictures, to print again, it just really talks of the perseverance of individuals, right? And that over X amount of time or years, generations, storytelling becomes important, like in the family, right? So I am trying to visualize through a process that is equally as dynamic as the struggles and negotiations that we are living through.
Thank you. I was definitely, when you were speaking over your print performance, the first one, Transfer and Takeoff too. That was very impactful. You were also doing it there was a lot of force that you were using there, and I was very impacted. So I don't know if you want to comment anything about that performance.
Yeah, I guess the other aspect that I don't usually include in that performance, I was really into sports as well. So in sports, there's usually impact, right? Either in hockey, football, soccer. And part of the reason why I was attracted to print is because of its relationship to sports as well, that pressure, that impact. And it just brought memories of my father saying that, that like I played a lot of basketball and I was usually the shortest one, right? So my father used to say, well, like, Alejandro, you have to understand that Canadians grow faster and are usually taller. So when I would hit myself against a person to find the position to score the basket, I remember that weight, that impact, where I transferred impact and I received information back about my size, about my speed. So all of these things, lived experiences ultimately led me to print.
Thank you. I really appreciate you're using a medium that's very ancient, right? In a sense, and you're using it in a very modern way. So we have one, perhaps the last question. Do you have Latin American students? or perhaps art students in general? And do you think your work influences theirs?
Great question. Great question. Absolutely. I hope that by moving the art historical or studio practice from Eurocentric histories or just Anglo North American histories, that other artists from other continents are included. So absolutely, yes, it has been my sort of it has been an interest of mine to be more inclusive in the artists and the practices I present in my classes.
Thank you, Alejandro. Thank you for doing that. That's very important. And for any of those in the audience that are not familiarized with how the history of art has been told for many years, I just want to comment that in the telling of Western art history, we are taught as art history students a very linear and a very westernized history. And so our Latin American art has kind of been seen as a annex or as something outside of the Western history. And recently, of course, there's been a lot of efforts to understand that Latin American art is also part of that history. So I just wanted to comment that and how the work that someone like Alejandro is doing is very important. And the fact that you are all here listening to him speak is also part of that rewriting of history. So thank you for being here. I believe this might be the last question. So Alejandro, thank you so much again for being here. This was wonderful. And to everyone that joined us, I will now leave the floor to Lily. Thank you, everybody.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Alejandro and Miret. This was such an interesting conversation. And I just want to remind everybody that Miret will be leading a series of conversations with Latin American, Canadian artists starting in the fall. So subscribe to Black's newsletter, keep an eye on what we have been doing, because this conversation keeps on going in our regular program. I also would like to thank Jorge for hosting and for this partnership, and to all of you who took time off your day today to share this time with us. Thank you, Jen, who was working in the background, helping this run smoothly. And if you want to watch this event again, or if you want to share it with your friends, this event was live streamed to Vlak's page on Facebook, so you will find it there. And we will also be sharing it with captions on our YouTube channel in a few days. We would love to get feedback on this event and know your thoughts about it. So I'm going to share a quick survey that Vlad put together. It only takes 2 minutes to complete. So if you can just click on it and do it right away, that would be wonderful. Thank you, Jorge. I will pass it on to you now.
What a pleasure to do this series with you. Thank you so much for everything. Thank you to Miret and Alejandro for that lovely conversation. I just want to tell you about tomorrow and remind everyone in the audience that the final event of the series is happening tomorrow. So please tell your friends, tell everyone you know. It's going to be a lunchtime concert and conversation called Songs of Resistance, Latin American Roots in Contemporary Canada. So we're very excited. We're going to have Benny Esguerra, who's a Colombian musician, an artist. He's going to perform his original songs, and he's going to talk about how Latin American artists are infusing new music and sounds from the past. So he's going to be in his studio and playing some sounds and showing us how he creates music and all the traditions and instruments that he uses. So it's going to be a really dynamic event tomorrow, again at lunchtime. So please join us, the last one of the series. And we're going to just send you again the landing page of the series, just so you can see the details for tomorrow. So please tell your friends. Two last things is one, if you want to stay in touch with VLAC and make sure you understand everything they're putting together and can stay in the loop about all their activities year round, I really suggest that you sign up for their newsletter. It's an awesome newsletter. They share all kinds of valuable stuff. So we're going to put the link in the chat to that. If you want to stay in touch with VPL and know what we're putting on together, you can go to the VPL's Facebook page. That's probably the easiest way for you to find out about upcoming events. We have some really cool ones coming up, which you'll see in the last slide when we wrap up this event. But yeah, check it out. Wonderful to see you all today. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your great questions. I'm going to do the awkward wave and disappear, but we're going to keep this open for a few minutes so that you can click on all the links that we shared. So buenas tardes, have a great day, and hope to see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.